On a dark night in early September of 2025, a significant and unprecedented event unfolded in the ongoing Russo-Ukrainian conflict. Long-range Ukrainian drones, operated by the Security Service of Ukraine, flew across the contested skies toward a strategic target deep inside Russian territory. Their objective was one of the most important pieces of energy infrastructure in Europe, the oil export port of Primorsk on the Baltic Sea. For the first time in the nearly 4-year-long war, Ukrainian forces were able to successfully strike at one of Russia's largest oil export hubs, a move calculated to have military, economic, and geopolitical consequences. Primorsk, located in the Leningrad region of northwestern Russia, serves as the terminus of the Baltic pipeline system and is considered one of Moscow's primary gateways for exporting crude oil to global markets. Typically, tens of millions of tons of oil pass through this port each year, generating billions of dollars in revenue that contribute to Russia's national budget and underwrite the Kremlin's capacity to sustain its war effort. The port also connects to Russia's so-called shadow fleet of older tankers that evade sanctions and deliver oil to buyers in Asia, Africa, and parts of Europe. For Moscow, Primorsk is more than just another export terminal. It is a linchpin in its financial lifeline, an artery carrying petrodollars into state coffers. On the night of September 12, Ukrainian SBU drones penetrated air defenses and struck key infrastructure at Primorsk. Multiple drones carried explosive payloads and were programmed for precision strikes. According to sources inside the Security Service of Ukraine, the drones hit several critical targets within the port, at least one large tanker moored at the docks, another adjacent vessel, and a major oil pumping station central to loading operations. The vessels, later identified by Reuters and Russian media as the Kusto and the Kai Yun, each with capacities on the order of hundreds of thousands of barrels, were among those damaged during the raid. Upon impact, fires erupted aboard the targeted tankers and at the pumping station. Russian regional officials, including Alexander Drozdenko, governor of Leningrad Oblast, confirmed that fires had broken out following the drone strikes, though they also stated that they were eventually extinguished and that no major oil spills or ship sinkings had occurred. At the time, authorities in St. Petersburg and the surrounding areas reported that Russian air defense systems had intercepted and shot down dozens of the incoming drones, but debris and the effects of the explosions were evident across the port. The attack forced an immediate and unprecedented suspension of crude oil loading operations at Primorsk. Terminal workers, emergency services, and port authorities rapidly ceased export activities as fire crews worked to contain the blazes. The unloading of oil from pipelines, the transfer of crude onto tanker ships, and other logistical functions halted as officials assessed the damage and attempted to restore safe working conditions. A port that normally handles massive volumes of oil, up to around 1 million barrels a day, was suddenly rendered inoperative, at least temporarily. The economic significance of this disruption cannot be overstated. Primorsk's role as a gateway for Russian oil exports means that even a short suspension of operations can translate into significant losses for Moscow's budget. Industry analysts estimated that daily losses due to halted exports could run into the tens of millions of dollars. These figures reflect not just the value of the oil itself, but the potential penalties, logistical delays, and contractual disruptions associated with failing to deliver on international sales agreements. For a country whose economy remains heavily reliant on energy exports, the strike represented a palpable financial blow. Beyond the immediate economic toll, the strike on Primorsk was strategically significant in the broader context of the war. Ukrainian officials and military strategists have increasingly adopted a campaign of targeting energy infrastructure, both on land and at sea, to undermine Russia's ability to generate revenue and sustain its military operations. By hitting oil terminals, refineries, pumping stations, and tanker fleets, Ukraine aimed to deprive Moscow of the funds necessary to pay for weapons, logistics, and personnel. Analysts noted that such strikes could compel Russia to either cut oil production or find alternative, less efficient means of exporting crude, both of which would have longer-term economic consequences. Indeed, in the weeks following the Primorsk attack, there were indications that Russian energy output and export capacity were being re-evaluated due to the cumulative effects of repeated drone strikes and targeted assaults on logistical networks. Some reports suggested that Russia might have to reduce oil production to compensate for damage to infrastructure or to divert resources toward repairs and enhance defensive measures. Although Moscow did not publicly acknowledge any large-scale production cuts, private sector sources and international energy analysts hinted at growing concerns within Russian oil companies about the sustainability of business as usual. The port attack also coincided with a broader uptick in hostilities across multiple fronts of the Russo-Ukrainian conflict. In some reports, Russian air defenses were simultaneously engaged on several axes, intercepting drones and missiles around key cities including Moscow. These multi-vector engagements underscored the evolving nature of modern warfare, where the battlefield extends hundreds of kilometers beyond traditional front lines and encompasses critical infrastructure deep in enemy territory. In addition to aerial drones, Ukraine increasingly deployed naval drones in the Black Sea to target oil tankers and logistical vessels that constituted part of Russia's shadow fleet. In one recent instance, Ukrainian sea drones struck and disabled a tanker known as Dashin in the Black Sea, another blow aimed directly at the auxiliary shipping network that allowed Russia to circumvent international sanctions and continue exporting oil. These maritime attacks compounded Moscow's challenges in maintaining secure and uninterrupted energy exports. Despite Russian efforts to bolster air defenses and firefighting capabilities at key installations, the long-term effects of Ukraine's targeted drone campaign were becoming evident. Insurance rates for shipping in the Black Sea and surrounding waters were rising, as insurers recalibrated risk assessments in light of successful strikes against commercial and energy vessels. Financial markets, too, responded to perceived disruptions in Russian oil flows, with price fluctuations reflecting uncertainty about future supplies. On the ground near the port itself, local communities felt the reverberations of the attack. Residents reported debris falling from the sky in nearby towns, and several flights at the Pulkovo airport in St. Petersburg were briefly paused due to safety concerns connected with the incursion. Russian authorities worked to reassure the public that the situation was under control, but the psychological impact of drones striking deep within territory long considered secure was palpable. International reactions to the Primorsk strike varied. Some Western governments, already grappling with the balance between supporting Ukraine and containing the escalation of conflict, expressed concern about the widening scope of attacks on energy infrastructure. Others viewed the operation as a legitimate military tactic aimed at weakening the economic foundations of an aggressor state. Global energy markets, meanwhile, remained watchful for further developments, recognizing that disruptions in Russian oil exports could have ripple effects on prices and supply chains worldwide. For Ukraine, the successful strike on Primorsk represented both a tactical and symbolic victory. It showcased the reach of Ukrainian drone technology and highlighted Kyiv's capacity to identify and exploit vulnerabilities in Russian defenses. Ukrainian officials framed the campaign against energy targets as a form of drone sanctions, designed to cut off the flow of petrodollars that fuel the Kremlin's war machine. According to sources within the Security Service of Ukraine, such operations would continue until Moscow was incentivized to negotiate a just and sustainable peace. The consequences of the strike continued to unfold in the months that followed. Russian oil terminals and shipping operations faced heightened security measures. Some analysts predicted structural shifts in how Russian crude was exported, possibly involving greater reliance on pipelines to Asia or discount sales through third-party intermediaries. Others speculated that Russia might escalate its own military operations in response to perceived attacks on national economic infrastructure. Within Ukraine, narratives around the Primorsk attack emphasized resilience and ingenuity. Despite being outgunned in many respects, Ukrainian forces had adapted to the realities of asymmetric warfare. Drones, once considered supplementary assets, had become central to Kyiv's strategic playbook, enabling strikes far beyond the front lines and delivering disproportionate impacts relative to their cost. Yet, for all the tactical successes, the war remained unresolved. Peace talks and diplomatic negotiations had stalled, and each side appeared entrenched in its objectives. For the civilians caught in the crossfire, life continued amid uncertainty, with energy disruptions, economic instability, and security concerns shaping daily existence. As winter approached, attention shifted to energy consumption patterns and the potential for further confrontations over vital resources. The international community watched closely, aware that the intersection of military conflict and global energy markets made the situation inherently volatile. The Primorsk strike stood as a testament to the changing nature of modern conflict, a reminder that battles today are fought not only with boots and tanks but with drones, pipelines, and supply chains. In the years ahead, historians and military analysts would likely study the Primorsk attack as a defining moment in the Russo-Ukrainian War. It illustrated the evolution of drone warfare, the strategic value of targeting economic infrastructure, and the complex interplay between military objectives and financial lifelines. For Ukraine, it was a bold gambit aimed at forcing a recalculation by a larger adversary. For Russia, it was an unwelcome exposure of vulnerabilities at the heart of its economic engine. And for the world, it served as a stark example of how interlinked global politics, energy security, and modern conflict had become in the 21st century.